Today, we're unpacking one of the most talked about approaches to longevity and anti-aging in the wellness world, Bryan Johnson's Blueprint. Johnson, a tech entrepreneur turned self-experimenter, has spent millions trying to reverse his biological age and engineer the body of an 18-year-old. His protocol is extreme, precise, and controversial. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age, with my co-host, Corbin Bruton. In this episode, we explore what Blueprint entails, what motivates Johnson's pursuit of optimized aging, and whether his approach reflects wellness or simply a refusal to grow old. We also ask, what lessons can the rest of us take from this ultra-disciplined experiment, and where it might miss the mark on what it truly means to be aging well.
Today, we're talking about one of the most talked about and honestly most controversial figures in the aging and longevity space, Bryan Johnson, and his anti-aging protocol, Blueprint.
Yeah, this should be fun. And I want to kind of on the onset, be clear that, respect what he's doing. I don't necessarily agree with what he's doing and how he's going about it. I don't necessarily agree with the results or the purpose for anything that he's doing. But yeah, this gets attention because it's part biohacking, which we do tend to poo-poo a lot on this podcast. It's part performance art, and it's actually part genuine experiment in pushing human limits. And kind of balancing through those is important in the conversation. But it also raises some bigger questions about what it really means to age well.
So, let's start with the basics here. Who is Bryan Johnson? And why is he so invested in this? What's his backstory?
So Bryan Johnson, and it's hard to believe any of our viewers and listeners probably aren't familiar with him, but Bryan Johnson is the tech entrepreneur who founded Braintree or Venmo, sold that to PayPal for, I think it was like $800 million. So he's a billionaire. He is somebody who recognized that years of stress, depression, weight gain, running a business, just paid a toll on his body. And for whatever reasons, he turned his attention to neuroscience and enhancement, started a company called Kernel, and he developed what has become called the Blueprint as an attempt to optimize literally every organ system in his body to function like that of an 18-year-old. And the guy spends like $2 million a year on this project. So where I think I really deviate from his intentions is that I think he sees disease or aging as a disease that has to be reversed or slowed through data, discipline, and technology. And we want to slow the aging process. That's what Aging Well is all about. But I don't think we see it as a disease. I don't see it as a negative, but he sees it as a disease and it's something to be reversed. He kind of has this whole don't die persona. He does speaking engagements and he's all over YouTube. I think you mentioned recently in a podcast episode that he has a Netflix documentary. So that's who Bryan Johnson is. He's trying to defy aging and he wants to live forever.
Would you say this is more about curiosity and science, or is this kind of a fear-driven resistance to aging?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I can't speak for him and he would better speak for himself. But in watching various videos and interviews with him, reading about what he's trying to do, I think it's likely a combination of both. I think a lot of it is motivated by control, but also, to a certain extent, progress and a philosophical rejection of bodily decline. He says he wants to make death optional. And to me, that seems deeply uncomfortable. It just seems that he is not comfortable with kind of losing control as we age. We can't control, in my opinion, we can't control everything that's going to happen, every circumstance of our life going forward. And the more we try and stress out over trying to control every little factor, to me, the less we're aging well. If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast.
All right. So, what does this protocol actually involve? I mean, walk us through the blueprint itself.
So the blueprint, and you can look at it a couple of different ways. He has a blueprint product that he sells, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's, I think, about $360 a month or something like that. But for him, it starts with a very strict daily routine. He's up at 5 a.m. He prides himself in his perfect sleep. So he goes to bed no matter what, same time, gets up at the same time. He exercises, his specific exercise routine, has a specific diet. It's a caloric restriction diet. It involves a tremendous amount of supplementation. I believe he takes about 100 pills a day. Significant amount of tech monitoring. So I'm sure, he's got the top of the line, activity trackers, sleep trackers, various devices that he uses in order to track basically every conceivable biomarker that might be linked to aging. His diet is a vegan diet. He dropped down to, I think he's a little bit higher than this now. He was taking a very, very specific calorie intake every day, 1,977 calories, I believe it was, tracking everything to the gram. So every item of food is measured. Like I say, he takes over 100 different pills. These are anything from supplements to nutraceuticals. He has a daily exercise program, involves cardiovascular, resistance training. He has a very strict routine on sleep optimization. And like I've mentioned, he's constantly tracking every potential biological marker. He does everything from epigenetic clocks to gut microbiome. And I think you even pointed out in an earlier episode that he actually even uses his own son's plasma, and was formerly actually using young blood transfusions to kind of change out his blood on a regular basis. So overall, the goal of Blueprint is to make his body function like it did when he was 18.
So, I mean, is it working?
Well, depends kind of who you talk to and what you define as working. I think there's mixed results. Some of the markers have improved. He insists that all his biological markers have improved. Less inflammation, less liver fat. His telomere lengths have lengthened. I've heard different numbers, but his biological clock is somewhere between 0.48 and a little over 0.5. So theoretically, he's aging at half the rate of the average individual. Again, take that with a grain of salt. His skin age is down, but not drastically. And I think it's interesting with his skin. There's a couple of videos out there where he talks about how people just started hating on him when he was doing this project and how bad he looked, how he looked older. And when he started on this low caloric diet, he lost a significant amount of body fat. And so if you've ever lost a lot of weight, you lose weight in your face. Your face gets thinner. And his face had gotten much too thin, which made him look much older. So he took an approach, and I forget all the 5 different steps that he took. There were different things that he tried. One of the things that he tried doing was he didn't have enough fat on his own body to use his own fat to inject into his face. But he had a donor fat that was injected into his face, and that was meant to kind of give a little bit more puffiness, normal lookingness to the face. That didn't work. There were a few other things that he tried and didn't try. And one of the things he did for around the eyes was plasma-rich, what they call it, plasma-rich fibrin, which is similar to PFR, but it gets injected below the eyes, and it's like we would use in a joint to repair joint. And he has to do that like 3 times a year. Again, it's a costly effort to do that. So, if we look at, his biological age is not equal to his chronological age. He's aging theoretically at a younger rate, but does this equate to kind of emotional, spiritual maturity, what we would label as aging well?
I mean, I can definitely see the appeal of precision health and taking ownership of your well being. But I guess my question is, what's the catch here?
Well, the catch is it's extremely expensive. I mean, how many of us have $2 million to invest a year in our aging well? And I understand, part of his goal is to be an N of one, to push the limits of science and find the ways that we can slow the aging process. But the methodology is just beyond normal aging. I mean, nobody has that kind of money. It's so time consuming. I mean, his entire life is now invested in not aging. And to me, what's the point in not aging if you're not going to actually live a life? And so it kind of creates a false sense that aging is something, just simply a technical problem that we can solve. And I think we did an episode recently on that whole premise that, aging is not a problem to be solved. I think his approach misses the big picture and misses the picture of what we're trying to, educate people on in this podcast is that aging also is about meaning. It's about relationships. It's about identity, and it's about letting go. I mean, yeah, we're going to get older, but so what? So we have a few wrinkles. So we maybe have a little bit more body fat. Yes, to me, the goal is to live as long as possible, but what is the point of living longer if there's no joy that comes with that, and if it's going to cost me millions of dollars a year? And you think about, if you're spending $2 million a year to live to be 147, which is what he believes he's going to live to based on his rate of aging. And he's, I think, in his near early 50s. So he's probably talking about wanting to live another 100 years. So you're talking $200 million, right, invested in keeping yourself alive for that period of time. What could we do with that $200 million to make everybody age well? And so with this whole approach that he's doing, I think there's a risk of moralizing health, that some people begin to believe, and if he is successful and more wealthy people begin to kind of take on the blueprint, are you a failure if you don't have an 18-year-old liver at 47?
Well, do you think the blueprint is aging well, or do you think it's resisting aging?
To me, personally, I think it's performance of youth. It's not necessarily a cultivation of wisdom or well-being. Aging well means becoming more fully yourself, not just not aging. It's not trying to be a younger version of yourself. It's trying to be a better version of yourself as the years progress. And it really brings me to, really two of the key concepts that we tend to focus on this podcast. And that's our SPIES. Again, a shout out to Jay, well-centered fitness, and our 6 pillars. And those are what we are trying to accomplish as we age, at least from my perspective, not just simply relying on the physical, which is what he's really doing. He's emphasizing the physical aspects of aging without looking at the spiritual, the intellectual, and he might argue that, all the science involved here is the intellectual piece. But I see nothing in what he's doing that relates to the emotional and social pieces of aging well. And, we can address the 6 pillars and how they kind of relate into what he's trying to do. But, we also have to consider, how do you relate to community, the mystery of life and death? And Blueprint really avoids that side of aging.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, Bryan Johnson is all in on this. But are there parts of the blueprint that everyday people might benefit from?
Well, absolutely. And I think a lot of it is, we've already talked about without spending millions of dollars on this podcast. There's consistency in exercise and diet, just eating well. He eats a vegan diet, he eats a very restricted number of calories. I think that could be a bit overly restrictive, but having that consistency in our diet, eating, whatever type of diet you choose works best for you. I guess you're maybe not necessarily choosing which works best for you, but what works best for you, sticking with that and being consistent with it, having an exercise protocol that you're doing regularly and doing effectively. Those are all good things. Sleep prioritization is one of our pillars, and I think we've elevated that to probably one of the most important things that we can do to age well, and that's to have good sleep hygiene. So being a little bit overly strict when it comes to our sleep can be a good thing. Getting into those habits that give us the routines that get us to sleep well is going to help us to age well. But again, that doesn't cost us anything except a little bit of time and time management. Data tracking can be helpful, but it's not absolutely necessary, and it's something we can overly stress about. And so using data to help inform our decisions, help us make those baby steps toward aging well, and realizing that it's not a all or nothing kind of thing. It's about asking, how does my current lifestyle impact long-term vitality? And so, there's some positive things that he is doing and how people can benefit from this. So again, what can I do from his protocol that would work for me? But we have to be careful because Blueprint assumes that the body is a machine and that optimization is the goal. And the goal of aging well isn't optimization. It's having a mindset of grace, rest, imperfection, and living life with vitality and purpose.
So maybe the best takeaway is not necessarily the method, but the intentionality.
Maybe. And what matters is not how many pills you take or how optimized your metrics are, but whether your life is in line with your values, your purpose, your relationships.
Yeah, but if you're talking to someone who's curious about the blueprint, but doesn't have millions to spend or a lab in their own house, what would you say?
Well, I would say first start with presence, not performance. Try and build up that purposeful social connection. That's going to be a bigger priority than spending millions of dollars. You can pursue health without obsessing over perfection. I think of the blue zones and how in not one of those have I heard of a single octogenarian who has commented that they lived to be 100 because of their biohacking, of the supplements that they took, of their red light therapy, of the injections of plasma under their eyes, or, the list goes on. None of them are talking about biohacking. It's all about basically following the SPIs and the 6 pillars to live a life that has purpose, meaning, and social connection. So it's better to ask questions that are things like, what kind of older adult do I want to become? Have a goal. What are we looking at accomplishing as we age? Who do I want to grow with? What kind of community do I want to have around me? What kind of life am I cultivating and not just preserving? I don't think Bryan Johnson is necessarily asking those questions.
Do you think he's not asking those questions because it's never been thought of? He's kind of like going rogue in a groundbreaking way, one would argue.
Well, and I don't necessarily accept that argument that he's going rogue. I mean, he is, but is it beneficial? He's spending a tremendous amount of money. He's not necessarily doing things scientifically. He's throwing so many different variables into the mix, and he can't identify any 1 or 2 or 3 or 100 different things that he's doing in the protocol that are specifically increasing his longevity. So somebody else is going to have to kind of tease through, okay, yeah, all these things have worked. Now we have to refine the science and look at that. An N of 1 is never enough to make good scientific conclusions. Now, he is testing out a lot of different theories. Some of it might be working, but I just don't think he is thinking, because I've not heard a single interview where he talks about why he wants to live forever. What is he going to contribute to the world about being able to live longer, other than being able to live longer? And I got to appreciate him. And as much as there's reason not to like Elon Musk, I heard an interview with him where he was asked about, kind of following after like Bryan Johnson, does he want to live forever? And he's like, no, I don't want to live forever. I think it's in bad judgment to live forever, because when we live too long, we don't get new ideas and society doesn't progress, society doesn't change. And so the question I'd have for Bryan Johnson is, what are you contributing to society? What are you doing to make the world better, other than the fact that you will look like your 18-year-old son for a longer period of time?
Yeah, that's a deep question. I love that question. Well, and that's exactly the kind of conversations we're committed to here on the Aging Well podcast. So if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you'd leave a review, share it with someone who's wrestling with this and what it means to age well, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and as always, here's to aging well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.